Dawn with an Emperor. Imagine the quiet break of dawn in ancient Rome. The city, usually bustling with the energy of markets, soldiers, and chariots, rests in a rare silence. It is here, in this precious stillness, that we find the emperor himself, Marcus Aurelius, rising from sleep. Marcus was not just an emperor, he was a philosopher-king, deeply inspired by Stoic teachings. His mornings were not hurried affairs filled with demands and haste. Instead, they were sacred rituals, a time for reflection and setting the tone for the day ahead. Why start our exploration with Marcus Aurelius? Because in those early hours we find timeless lessons that are just as relevant today as they were 2,000 years ago. Through understanding his morning practices, we can learn how to infuse our own lives with purpose, calm, and resilience. In the quiet of the dawn, Marcus would begin his day with a ritual that many of us overlook, waking up to his own thoughts. Upon opening his eyes, he didn't immediately reach for distractions. Instead, he allowed himself to become aware of his own mind. This is the first step we can take from him, creating space to listen to ourselves before the day's noise takes over. Marcus would often turn to his journal, writing reflections and reminders in what is now known as the Meditations. These writings served as a guide, a way to align his actions with his principles. You might not be an emperor, but this practice remains powerful. Start your day by jotting down your thoughts, intentions, or gratitude. It is a way of grounding yourself, creating a personal compass for the challenges ahead. In his writings, Marcus often reminds himself of his role and purpose. He would reflect on the nature of his duties, recognizing them as part of a greater whole. In today's terms, this might mean acknowledging the roles you play, whether as a parent, a worker, or a friend, and seeing them as opportunities rather than burdens. Remind yourself of why you do what you do. This shift in perspective can transform obligation into meaningful service. Stoicism teaches the importance of focusing on what we can control. Marcus Aurelius himself was well aware of the burdens of power and the uncontrollable nature of many aspects of life. Yet each morning, he would remind himself of the 3 circles of control. These circles help us identify what is within our power to change, what we can influence, and what we must accept. The first circle is the inner circle, our own thoughts and actions. This is where we have the most control. You can decide how you respond to situations, how you treat others, and how you care for yourself. The second circle involves the things we can influence, but not fully control. These might include relationships or projects at work. You can affect them through effort and intention, but you cannot dictate outcomes. The final circle is the realm of what we cannot control. The weather, the past, or the opinions of others fall here. Accepting this is crucial, as resistance only leads to frustration and stress. Imagine starting your day with this clarity. By focusing your attention on what you can control, you free yourself from unnecessary worries about everything else. This is not just Stoicism in theory, it is Stoicism in practice, a strategy for living. As Marcus continued his morning, he would often contemplate mortality, a practice known as memento mori. This was not morbid, but rather a reminder of the preciousness of each day. By acknowledging the finiteness of life, you can refocus on what truly matters. This moment of reflection can help you prioritize your time and energy, ensuring that you spend it on things that align with your values. While you might not be tasked with ruling an empire, your mornings still set the stage for the day. Consider incorporating a brief meditation or quiet contemplation to connect with your values and intentions. This could even be inspired by the Anti-Manipulation Manual, a resource that helps you pause between impression and judgment. This pause is crucial in a world that often demands instant reactions. The book, available on Amazon with a link in the description, guides you to preserve judgment and make choices aligned with your values. After setting his intentions and reminding himself of his impermanence, Marcus Aurelius would engage in simple physical exercise. This was a way to honor the mind-body connection. Physical activity, even in small doses, can invigorate the mind and prepare you for the day. It does not require a gym membership or elaborate routines. A walk in the morning light, some stretches, or a brief session of mindful breathing can serve the same purpose. Finally, Marcus made sure to be of service. As an emperor, his decisions affected millions, but he understood that service starts small. This could mean helping someone nearby, offering a kind word, or simply being present. By starting your day with a mindset of service, you shift focus from self-centered desires to a broader sense of community. You too can embody this practice. Look for small ways to support those around you. Even small acts of kindness ripple outward, creating a more compassionate world. Marcus Aurelius's mornings were not just about personal gain. They were about preparing to serve a higher purpose. This sense of duty, guided by wisdom and humility, is the essence of Stoic leadership. As you weave his teachings into your mornings, you cultivate a life that is resilient, meaningful, and deeply connected to your values. The dawn offers us a unique opportunity. It is a time of renewal, a blank canvas on which to paint our intentions. By drawing inspiration from Marcus Aurelius, you can create morning rituals that ground you in the present, prepare you for the day, and align with your deepest values. In these quiet hours, you are not rushing to meet the demands of the world. Instead, you are setting the tone, deciding who you will be and how you will engage with life. This is the gift of the dawn, and it is available to each of us every day. So, as you rise tomorrow, remember Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, who began his day with thoughtful intention. Let his example guide you not just in the morning, but throughout your life. The lessons of the Stoics are not confined to ancient texts. They are living practices that can transform the way you see the world, one morning at a time. The morning mindset. The morning is a sacred time, a moment of transition between the stillness of night and the busyness of day. It is a time when the world is quiet, the mind is fresh, and possibilities seem endless. Marcus Aurelius understood the power of this time and harnessed it to set the foundation for his day. His mornings were not rushed. They were deliberate acts of preparation, designed to align his spirit with his duties as emperor and his ideals as a Stoic. Imagine Marcus as he awoke, perhaps before the sun had even peeked over the horizon, the quiet of dawn enveloping him in a gentle embrace. In these early hours, he did not reach for distractions. Instead, he reached inward, reflecting on his thoughts, intentions, and the challenges he might face. This practice of morning reflection is something we can integrate into our own lives, no matter our station or status. His reflections were guided by questions, simple yet profound. Questions like, what will I focus on today? How will I handle adversity? What virtues will I embody? Asking ourselves these kinds of questions can be a powerful way to start the day. They set the mind on a path of purpose and clarity, reminding us of what truly matters. It's not about the tasks we tick off a list, but about the character we build through our actions. Marcus also understood the importance of grounding his morning in philosophical thought. He would often turn to the wisdom of philosophers who came before him, allowing their insights to shape his own thinking. This is something we can do as well, whether by reading a few lines from a Stoic text or contemplating a quote that resonates with us. The aim is not to accumulate knowledge, but to let these ideas guide how we interact with the world. In our modern lives, it can be tempting to dive straight into the whirlwind of emails, messages, and notifications the moment we wake. But Marcus knew the value of starting the day with quiet reflection, of building a buffer against the chaos to come. This is a practice we can adopt. We can choose to create a space in our mornings for contemplation, setting aside even just a few minutes to align with our highest ideals before the noise of the day takes hold. Marcus's mornings were about more than contemplation, though. They were also a time for gratitude. Even with the weight of an empire on his shoulders, he made a conscious effort to acknowledge the good in his life. This is a simple practice we can all adopt. As you wake, take a moment to reflect on what you are grateful for. This can be anything: a restful sleep, a loving relationship, or the promise of a new day. Gratitude shifts our focus from what we lack to what we have, fostering a sense of abundance and contentment. As you adopt this practice, you might find that gratitude begins to weave itself into the fabric of your day, influencing how you perceive challenges and opportunities alike. It is a subtle shift, but a powerful one, aligning you with the Stoic ideal of finding joy in what is, rather than yearning for what is not. Midway through this exploration of Marcus Aurelius's morning mindset, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. By doing so, you'll stay connected to these teachings, nurturing a community that values wisdom, resilience, and personal growth. Returning to Marcus's routine, we find another key element: preparation for the unexpected. The Stoics taught that life is unpredictable, filled with unforeseen events and challenges. Marcus prepared himself mentally for this reality each morning. He reminded himself that people might be difficult, plans might change, and outcomes might be uncertain. This mental rehearsal is not an exercise in pessimism, but in readiness. It is about accepting what is beyond our control and focusing on how we respond. You can adopt this practice by taking a few moments each morning to consider the unpredictability of life. Think about the things that might not go as planned and remind yourself that your power lies in your response. It is liberating to release the need to control everything and instead focus on maintaining your composure and principles no matter what arises. This mindset, cultivated each morning, builds a foundation of resilience. It allows you to navigate your day with a calm center, unshaken by the storms you might encounter. This is the essence of Stoic strength, not a hardened exterior, but an inner peace that remains steady amidst chaos. Finally, Marcus Aurelius understood that a meaningful morning is incomplete without a sense of purpose. He knew that each day was an opportunity to contribute to the greater good, to serve something beyond himself. He spent his mornings contemplating how he could best serve his role as emperor, leader, and human being. This perspective is something we can all embrace. Whether our sphere of influence is vast or small, we can start the day with a commitment to make a positive impact in whatever ways are available to us. Think about how you can serve today. It might be through your work, by showing kindness to others, or by being a positive influence in your community. By setting an intention to serve, you align your actions with a sense of purpose that transcends personal gain. You become part of something larger, contributing to a world that is a little more compassionate and a little more just. As you consider the morning practices of Marcus Aurelius, think about how you can weave these elements into your own routine. Begin with reflection, asking yourself guiding questions that set your intention for the day. Ground your thoughts in the wisdom of those who came before and cultivate gratitude for the blessings you have. Prepare yourself mentally for the unpredictability of life, accepting what you cannot control and focusing on your responses. And finally, find your purpose by considering how you can serve others, aligning your actions with a higher calling. The morning offers us a gift, a chance to start anew, to set the tone for the day ahead. By incorporating these Stoic practices, we can begin each day with clarity, purpose, and resilience. The teachings of Marcus Aurelius remind us that the way we start our morning matters. It is a powerful opportunity to shape who we are and how we engage with the world. Let the wisdom of the Stoics guide you, not just in these early hours, but throughout your life. Each morning is a chance to reaffirm your values, to strengthen your resolve, and to live in accordance with the principles you hold dear. The morning mindset of Marcus Aurelius is a model of deliberate intention, offering a path to a life well lived. Quiet reflection time. In the stillness of early morning before the day fully awakens, there lies a unique opportunity for quiet reflection. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, knew the power of these moments. As he began his day, he engaged in a practice of introspection, using this time to align his thoughts and actions with his deepest values. Picture yourself in those early hours. The world outside is yet to stir. In these moments, the day is yours to shape. It's a blank canvas. For Marcus, this was not just a routine, but a sacred ritual. He would sit quietly, his thoughts turning inward, sifting through the noise of the world to focus on what truly mattered. Ask yourself, how often do you take the time to reflect in silence? In a world filled with constant notifications and endless tasks, the art of quiet reflection can feel like a luxury. Yet, it is in these moments of introspection that we find clarity. They're a chance to pause, to step back, and to consider the bigger picture of our lives. In his writings, Marcus Aurelius frequently reminded himself to embrace what he could control and to let go of what he could not. This mindset can be our guide. As you sit in quiet contemplation, think about the challenges you face. Identify which of these are within your control. Perhaps it is your attitude towards a difficult situation or the effort you put into your work. Now, consider what lies beyond your control: the behavior of others, the outcome of events, and the passage of time itself. Acknowledge these elements, not with frustration, but with acceptance. This acceptance is not passive resignation, but a recognition of reality. By focusing on your own actions and reactions, you empower yourself to navigate life's complexities with grace. During these moments of reflection, gratitude can also play a vital role. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about the importance of gratitude, recognizing it as a key component of a fulfilling life. Reflect on the things you are thankful for. They need not be grand or spectacular. They can be as simple as the warmth of the sun on your face or the kindness of a friend. Gratitude shifts our perspective from what is lacking to what we have. It grounds us in the present, allowing us to appreciate the richness of our lives. As you incorporate gratitude into your morning reflection, notice how it alters your mood and sets a positive tone for the day ahead. Alongside gratitude, Marcus Aurelius encouraged himself to consider his guiding principles. What values do you hold dear? Honesty, integrity, kindness. Use this time to reaffirm these values, to remind yourself of the standards you wish to live by. This is not about perfection, but about intention. Setting a clear intention helps steer your actions throughout the day, aligning them with your core beliefs. This practice of reflection is not just about looking inward, but also about envisioning the day to come. Visualize the tasks ahead, the interactions you anticipate, and the challenges you may face. How will you approach them with the wisdom of the Stoics? Imagine yourself responding with patience, understanding, and resilience. This mental rehearsal prepares you to meet the day with confidence. Incorporating Marcus Aurelius's morning reflections into your life might start simply. Even 5 to 10 minutes of dedicated quiet time can have a profound impact. Find a comfortable space, free from distractions. Perhaps you spend this time journaling, writing down your thoughts and intentions. Or maybe you prefer to meditate, focusing on your breath and letting your thoughts settle like leaves on a pond. Remember, there is no right or wrong way to reflect. The goal is to create a moment of peace, to connect with yourself on a deeper level. As you develop this habit, you may find that it becomes a cherished part of your routine, a grounding force in your life. The beauty of quiet reflection is that it cultivates a mindset of mindfulness that extends beyond the morning. Throughout the day, you can return to the intentions and insights you established during your reflection time. When faced with stress or uncertainty, recall the calm and clarity you experienced in those early hours. Let it guide your actions and decisions. This practice also encourages us to be present, not just with ourselves, but with others. As you move through your day, engage with those around you with the same thoughtfulness you applied in your reflections. Listen actively, respond with kindness, and offer your full attention. In doing so, you create meaningful connections and foster an environment of mutual respect and understanding. In the teachings of the Stoics, there is a recurring theme of living in accordance with nature. This idea extends to the rhythms of our daily lives. By beginning the day with reflection, we tune in to a natural cycle of introspection and action. We prepare ourselves mentally and emotionally, ensuring that our actions are deliberate and purposeful. As you continue to explore the morning practices of Marcus Aurelius, remember that reflection is a practice, not a one-time event. It requires patience and consistency. Some days your mind may feel scattered, your thoughts elusive. On others, you may find profound clarity and insight. Both experiences are valuable. They are part of the ongoing journey of self-discovery and growth. Marcus Aurelius's reflections remind us that our mornings set the stage for the day. They offer a moment to connect with our true selves, to ground our intentions in our values, and to prepare for whatever lies ahead. In these quiet moments, we find a compass for navigating the complexities of life with wisdom and grace. As you rise each morning, let the lessons of the Stoics infuse your reflection time. Be patient with yourself, embrace the silence, and let your thoughts unfold naturally. This is your time, a gift you give to yourself to become the best version of who you are. By embracing these practices, you lay the foundation for a life of purpose, clarity, and resilience. Just as Marcus Aurelius did, you too can begin each day with strength and serenity, ready to face the world with open eyes and an open heart. Meditation of duty. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, began his day with a ritual that many of us might overlook as mundane or even unnecessary. Yet it was a cornerstone of his daily life. This ritual was the meditation on duty. It was not merely an exercise of the mind, but a commitment of the spirit. It set the tone for his actions and decisions throughout the day. But what does it mean to meditate on duty, and how can it transform our own mornings? Picture this: the early morning light barely peeking through the curtains, the world outside still asleep, shrouded in a gentle silence. This is the moment Marcus seized, a moment of peace before the demands of the day could intrude. He would take this time to remind himself of his responsibilities, both as an emperor and as a human being. This was not just about fulfilling obligations, but about aligning himself with a greater purpose. To understand the meditation of duty, we must first explore the concept of duty itself. In Stoic philosophy, duty is not a burden, but an opportunity. It is the chance to act in accordance with nature and reason. Marcus viewed his responsibilities as a pathway to live virtuously. His duty was not just to rule justly over his empire, but to be a good man, a true Stoic. He saw every action as interconnected, part of a larger whole. When you meditate on duty, you begin by asking yourself, what is required of me today? This question is not meant to overwhelm, but to focus. It strips away the unnecessary, distills life to its essence. For Marcus, this meant contemplating his role, not just as a ruler, but as a father, a husband, a friend. Each role with its own set of duties, each an opportunity to practice virtue. Imagine taking a few moments each morning to sit with your responsibilities, not as a list of chores to be ticked off, but as invitations to grow. This practice encourages a shift in perspective. Instead of seeing duties as external impositions, you start to recognize them as stepping stones on your path to becoming who you want to be. Take, for example, the duty to be present with others. In the hustle of modern life, it is easy to overlook the importance of truly listening to those around us. Yet, Marcus Aurelius understood that duty to others is central to our own growth. By meditating on how we can serve those we encounter each day, we deepen our relationships and enhance our own character. Now, this does not mean we must please everyone or ignore our own needs. On the contrary, the Stoics teach us to balance our duties to others with our duty to ourselves. This is where discernment comes into play. As you contemplate your duties, consider where your true priorities lie. This clarity can help prevent burnout and ensure that you are living in harmony with your values. As you engage in this morning reflection, allow yourself to ponder how each duty you hold aligns with your greater goals. For Marcus, leading an empire meant ensuring peace and prosperity for his people, but it also meant nurturing his own wisdom, patience, and fortitude. His meditation on duty was a way to remind himself why he rose each day, to fulfill not just the expectations of his station, but the expectations of his soul. In our own lives, we can adapt this practice by setting intentions that align with our values. Perhaps your duty today is to be a compassionate partner, a dedicated worker, or a mindful parent. By visualizing how you will embody these roles, you create a mental framework for success. You prepare yourself for the challenges and opportunities that may arise, equipped with a clear sense of purpose. What Marcus Aurelius understood is that duty is not static. It evolves as we do. As we grow, our understanding of our responsibilities deepens. This is why the practice of daily meditation on duty is so powerful. It allows us to continually reassess and realign, ensuring that we are not just moving through life on autopilot, but actively steering our course. Let us consider the practical aspects of this meditation. Set aside a few quiet moments each morning. Find a space where you can sit undisturbed and reflect. You might begin by writing down your roles and their associated duties. Reflect on how these connect to your core values. Ask yourself, how can I bring my best self to each task? How can I approach each duty with integrity and grace? As you complete your reflections, carry these intentions into your day. When faced with a difficult decision or a challenging interaction, recall your morning meditation. Let it ground you, remind you of your purpose. This is how Marcus Aurelius approached his day, with a steadfast dedication to living in accordance with his principles. Remember, too, that this practice is not about perfection. Marcus himself acknowledged his own limitations and failings. He was not seeking to be flawless, but to be better each day. Allow yourself the same compassion. When you stumble, let it be an opportunity to learn and recalibrate. This is the essence of Stoic resilience. Consider the impact of a life guided by these principles. With each day, you cultivate an inner strength, a quiet confidence that comes from knowing your path. You become more attuned to the needs of others, more capable of addressing the demands of life with wisdom and empathy. By embracing the meditation of duty, you set a foundation for a life that is not only purposeful, but deeply fulfilling. This practice is a gentle reminder that we are all part of something greater, connected by our actions and choices. It is an invitation to rise each morning with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to meet the world with a steady heart and an open mind. The teachings of Marcus Aurelius offer us a timeless guide. They remind us that our duties, when embraced with intention and sincerity, become the very fabric of a life well lived. As you integrate this meditation into your own morning routine, let it serve as a beacon, guiding you through the complexities of life with clarity and resolve. In the quiet of the early morning, find your center. Reflect on your duty, not as a burden, but as a gift. As Marcus Aurelius did, let it be your compass, a way to navigate the day with purpose, dignity, and grace. This is the power of the Stoic morning, the meditation of duty. A simple yet profound practice that can transform each day into a meaningful journey toward your best self. Gratitude's first light. Imagine the world wrapped in the soft, gentle hues of dawn. As the first light of day brushes against the sky, casting a golden glow over the horizon, a new beginning unfolds. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, welcomed each morning with a quiet ritual, a practice of gratitude that set the tone for the hours to come. Gratitude for Marcus was not a fleeting sentiment or a mere nod to the pleasant parts of life. It was a foundational principle, a way to acknowledge the interconnectedness of all things. In the early light, he would take a moment to reflect on the very fact of his existence. He recognized the wonder of simply being alive, the gift of breathing, and the opportunity to partake in another day. This practice invites us to slow down, to pause and consider the abundance in our own lives. Gratitude is more than saying thank you for the easy moments. It is about seeing the value in every experience, even the challenging ones. It is about understanding that every difficulty shapes us, every setback teaches us, and every moment is an opportunity to grow. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about the importance of perspective. He reminded himself that, despite the chaos of the world, there is always something to be grateful for. When we start our day with gratitude, we set a frame for how we perceive the world. We cultivate a mindset that looks beyond the immediate challenges and sees the broader picture. A life full of lessons, connections, and possibilities. In practical terms, how can you integrate this simple yet profound practice into your day? Begin by identifying 3 things you are grateful for. They need not be grand gestures or life-changing events. Perhaps it is the warmth of your morning cup of tea, the comforting sound of bird song as the world wakes, or the presence of a loved one who supports you unconditionally. These small acknowledgements create a ripple effect. They remind you that, no matter the difficulties you face, there are always elements of life that uplift and nourish you. This is not to ignore the hardships, but to balance them with the recognition of good. Marcus Aurelius often contemplated the impermanence of life, the fleeting nature of everything we hold dear. This awareness of mortality was not meant to bring sadness, but to enhance appreciation for the present. To truly practice gratitude is to understand that nothing is guaranteed and that every moment is precious. It is to live with a full heart, embracing each day as a unique opportunity to engage with life meaningfully. Gratitude also fosters resilience. When you approach life with a grateful mindset, you become more adaptable, more capable of navigating uncertainty. You see that even in the midst of struggle, there is room for appreciation. This perspective strengthens you, helping you to endure and to find hope in seemingly impossible situations. Interestingly, Marcus's writings often show a thoughtful man who was deeply aware of the burdens he carried as emperor, yet he chose to focus on what he could control, his own thoughts and actions. He was grateful for the chance to serve, to lead with wisdom and integrity. In doing so, he exemplified the Stoic ideal, to act with virtue, guided by reason, no matter the external circumstances. In your own life, consider how gratitude might transform the way you face daily challenges. Instead of viewing obstacles as insurmountable, see them as opportunities to practice patience, kindness, and determination. Gratitude allows you to reframe your experiences, seeing them as part of a larger narrative where you have the power to write your own story. As you cultivate this practice, you might find that gratitude also deepens your relationships. When you express appreciation for those around you, it strengthens bonds and fosters a sense of connection. People feel seen and valued, creating a cycle of goodwill and mutual support. This is not just beneficial to others. It enriches your own life as well, bringing more joy and harmony to your interactions. The teachings of Marcus Aurelius encourage us to approach life with an open heart and a clear mind. Gratitude is one of the keys to this state of being. It requires mindfulness, a deliberate effort to notice and appreciate the present. It is an invitation to step outside of ourselves, to see the world with fresh eyes and to find beauty and meaning in the everyday. For those who seek to deepen their understanding of Stoic principles, the Anti-Manipulation Manual, Stoic Tactics for Clarity, Boundaries and Inner Control offers a practical guide. This book helps you protect the space where gratitude can flourish, the space between an event and your judgment of it. It teaches you how to maintain your inner balance so you can choose gratitude over reactivity, clarity over confusion. This manual draws on the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius and other Stoic thinkers, illustrating how to navigate the pressures of modern life with poise and confidence. It is a helpful resource for anyone looking to strengthen their capacity for gratitude and to protect their inner peace. So, as the morning unfolds and the world around you awakens, take a moment to center yourself in gratitude. Feel the weight of your body against the earth, the gentle rise and fall of your breath. Allow yourself to acknowledge the gifts of life, those that are seen and unseen. Let gratitude become the lens through which you view the world, and watch as it transforms your experience of each day. This is the essence of gratitude's first light. It is a practice that invites you to live with intention and to recognize the abundance that surrounds you. As you embrace this mindset, you become more attuned to the rhythm of life, more aligned with your values, and more capable of meeting life's demands with grace and resilience. In the spirit of Marcus Aurelius, let gratitude guide you. Let it be your anchor in times of change, your compass in moments of uncertainty. With each new dawn, embrace the opportunity to grow, to learn, and to connect more deeply with the world around you. This is the power of gratitude, a transformative force that lights the way to a more meaningful and fulfilling life. Mindful movement. In the quiet moments before dawn, while the world still slumbers, a profound opportunity exists. This is the time when Marcus Aurelius began his day, not with haste or anxiety, but with slow, deliberate movements that grounded him in the present. The emperor understood that the way he started his morning would shape the hours that followed. This is the practice of mindful movement, a dance between body and mind, a way to align one's being with the rhythm of the world. Imagine, if you will, the gentle stretch of arms reaching toward the sky, a yawn that opens the lungs to the coolness of dawn air. Picture the sensation of feet meeting the floor, each step calculated, each motion purposeful. Marcus knew that by engaging in these simple rituals, he was not just awakening his body, but also orienting his mind towards the day ahead. This was not a rush to action, but a sacred ritual of becoming fully present. In today's fast-paced world, the morning often feels like a race against the clock. We rush to check our messages, gulp down a quick breakfast, and dash out the door. But Marcus Aurelius teaches us that there is a different path, one that involves slowing down and embracing each movement with intention. This practice roots us in the here and now, serving as a reminder that we are not mere automatons, but conscious beings capable of steering our own ship. The Stoics believed deeply in the interconnectedness of body and mind. They understood that our physical actions can influence our mental state, and vice versa. By bringing awareness to our movements, we can cultivate a sense of presence that permeates our entire day. This begins with the first stretch, the first step, the first breath. Marcus Aurelius viewed these moments as opportunities to practice Stoic principles: patience, discipline, and mindfulness. Consider the act of walking. It is something we often do without thought, a means to an end. But what if we slowed down, brought awareness to each step? Feel the texture of the ground beneath your feet, the shifting of your weight, the gentle sway of your arms. This is not about perfection, but about presence. When you walk with intention, you create a moving meditation, a practice that aligns body and mind. The Stoics also remind us that mindful movement is not just about the physical act, but about the inner dialogue that accompanies it. When Marcus Aurelius walked through the gardens of his palace, he would reflect on his duties and responsibilities. He would use this time to clear his mind, to set intentions for the day. This practice can be our own, a way to sift through the noise of our thoughts and find clarity. Mindful movement can take many forms. It might be a gentle stretch upon waking, a slow walk through your neighborhood, or even a few moments of stillness, seated and breathing deeply. The form matters less than the intention. By choosing to move with awareness, you anchor yourself in the present moment. This is where your power lies, in the now, not in the worries of the future or the regrets of the past. As you embrace this practice, notice how your perception shifts. The world becomes sharper, more vibrant. The rustle of leaves, the song of a bird, the play of light on water. These details become more pronounced, more meaningful. You start to notice the interconnectedness of all things, the dance of life unfolding around you. This is the world that Marcus Aurelius saw, a world where every detail holds significance. Mindful movement also serves as a reminder of our own impermanence. The Stoics taught that we are but a small part of a vast universe, and that our time here is limited. By moving through each day with intention, we honor this truth. We acknowledge that each moment, each breath, is a gift. This perspective fosters a deep appreciation for life, a gratitude that transforms the mundane into the extraordinary. Incorporating mindful movement into your routine is a simple yet powerful way to connect with Stoic teachings. It requires no special equipment, no elaborate ritual. All it demands is your attention, your willingness to pause and to be present. As you practice, you will find that this awareness extends beyond your morning routine, influencing how you interact with others, how you respond to challenges, and how you perceive the world. So, as you rise tomorrow and greet the new day, consider the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius. Move with intention, with grace, with presence. Let each step be a reminder of your place in the world, of the interconnectedness of all things. By embracing mindful movement, you set the tone for a day guided by clarity, purpose, and resilience. You become not just a participant in life, but an observer, a steward of your own experience. In the practice of mindful movement, we find a bridge between the teachings of the ancient Stoics and the realities of our modern lives. It is a practice that transcends time and space, a testament to the enduring wisdom of those who came before us. By integrating these simple rituals into our daily lives, we honor their legacy and create a life that is rich with meaning and intention. Mindful movement is a gentle yet profound invitation to live with awareness. It is a call to slow down, to listen, to feel, to remember that each day is a chance to grow, to learn, and to connect more deeply with the world around you. This is the power of mindful movement, a transformative practice that lights the way to a more meaningful and fulfilling life. Writing the day ahead. Imagine waking up at 5 a.m. before the world around you begins to stir. This is a threshold between night and day, a silent moment, yours to shape. Marcus Aurelius understood the power of this quiet time. As a Stoic philosopher and Roman emperor, he approached each day with mindfulness and purpose. For Marcus, the first moments upon waking were not filled with haste or distraction. Instead, his morning began with writing, not simply as a task, but as a vital practice. In his journal, known now as Meditations, he captured thoughts, reflections, and intentions. This was not just a record of his days, but a guide for how to live them. We might wonder why right at the start of the day. There is a kind of magic in setting pen to paper before the world's demands take hold. It is a ritual that grounds you. It focuses your mind on what truly matters. Through writing, you clarify your intentions. You frame your day with purpose and with meaning. For Marcus, this practice was a conversation with himself, a way to anchor his thoughts in the teachings of Stoicism. He reminded himself of the principles he wished to embody: courage, wisdom, justice, and temperance. These were not just lofty ideals, but practical guides for daily life. Consider how this practice might serve you. As you write, you engage in a dialogue with your inner self. What challenges might you face today? What virtues will guide your actions? By setting these intentions, you steer the course of your day toward what is meaningful and enduring. Start with a simple question: what is my purpose today? It could be as broad as living with kindness, or as specific as completing a task. Write it down. Let this be your guiding star. As Marcus did, remind yourself of the impermanence of life. Reflect on the finite nature of your time and the gift of each new day. Writing also offers a space to confront your fears and your doubts. Marcus often reflected on his own shortcomings, not to dwell on them, but to understand and to grow. This honest self-assessment is a core Stoic practice. It is through acknowledging our weaknesses that we find the strength to overcome them. As you write, practice gratitude. List 3 things you are thankful for. They need not be grand gestures. Small things like a warm cup of tea or a smile from a stranger can fill your heart. Gratitude shifts your focus from what you lack to what you have. It nurtures a mindset of abundance. Now, consider the people in your life. How will you interact with them? Marcus wrote often of the importance of community and service to others. Reflect on how you can contribute positively to those around you. This intention can transform mundane interactions into meaningful connections. Writing in this way is not about perfection. It is about process. It is a practice that evolves, just as you do. Do not worry about the quality of your words. Focus instead on the clarity of your thoughts. Allow yourself the freedom to explore ideas without judgment. This is your time for reflection. In the busyness of modern life, setting aside time to write can seem daunting. Yet, it is precisely in the chaos that this practice holds value. It creates a space for calm and for clarity. Even just 10 minutes can make a profound difference. Imagine starting each day with this quiet moment. You sit with your thoughts, your pen in hand. The world outside is still dark, but inside you, there is light. You write to discover, to explore. You write to remind yourself of who you are and who you aspire to be. Marcus Aurelius knew the power of beginning the day with intention. By writing, he cultivated a mindset ready to face whatever the day might bring. This is a practice you too can embrace. It is not about emulating every detail of his life, but about finding what resonates with you. As you develop this habit, you may find that your perspective shifts. Challenges become less daunting and your reactions more measured. You move through your day with a sense of purpose, a quiet confidence rooted in reflection. This morning practice, inspired by Marcus, is more than a routine. It is a ritual, one that aligns your mind with the principles of Stoicism, a practice that prepares you to meet the day with grace and with resilience. So, tomorrow, as the dawn breaks, consider picking up your journal. Write the day ahead, not as a list of tasks, but as a narrative filled with intention and with meaning. In doing so, you honor the wisdom of the Stoics and you create a life rich with purpose. Applying Stoic rituals. Imagine it's 5 in the morning. The world around you is still and quiet. The first light has yet to pierce the horizon, and the air holds a chill that awakens your senses. This is the hour when Marcus Aurelius would rise to begin his day, not with haste or chaos, but with a series of deliberate actions that set the tone for everything that followed. Let us step into this morning ritual and see how it can guide our own lives. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor and a Stoic philosopher, understood the importance of starting his day with intention. His mornings were a time to prepare his mind and spirit for the challenges ahead. In his writings, he often reflected on the nature of the world, his role in it, and the values he wished to uphold. This ritual of reflection was not merely a task, but a preparation for life itself. As you wake up and rise, think of your first moments as setting the stage for the rest of your day. The Stoics believed in the power of perception, in choosing how we see the world and respond to it. Marcus began his day by reminding himself of the nature of humanity and the universe. He would consider the challenges he might face and remind himself to respond with wisdom and virtue. You can do something similar. When you wake, before reaching for your phone or diving into tasks, take a moment to consider your intentions. What kind of person do you wish to be today? How will you respond to the inevitable frustrations and challenges? By starting with these reflections, you align yourself with a mindset of purpose and resilience. Marcus Aurelius also recognized the importance of physical health. His mornings often included exercises to strengthen his body and prepare it for the demands of his day. While you may not be an emperor, the principle remains the same. A healthy body supports a healthy mind. Incorporate some form of physical activity into your morning routine. It does not need to be strenuous or lengthy. A simple walk or a few stretches can awaken your body and set a positive tone for the day. As you move, focus on the sensations of your body, the rhythm of your breath, the feeling of the air against your skin. This mindfulness in motion can anchor you in the present. It reminds you of the Stoic lesson that we only truly have this moment. By being present, you cultivate a sense of gratitude and appreciation for life. After his physical preparation, Marcus might spend time in quiet contemplation or reading. He would immerse himself in the teachings of other philosophers, finding guidance and wisdom in their words. For you, this could mean setting aside time to read something that inspires you, something that challenges you to think deeply. It might be a book, a poem, or even a passage from Marcus's own meditations. The key is to engage with ideas that expand your understanding and align with your values. Consider how these teachings apply to your life. Reflect on their relevance and how they might guide your actions and decisions. This is not passive consumption, but active engagement with wisdom that has stood the test of time. Another vital aspect of Marcus's morning was gratitude. In his reflections, he would acknowledge the good in his life, the people he cared about, and the opportunities he had. Practicing gratitude can shift your focus from what is lacking to what is present. It fosters a mindset of abundance rather than scarcity. Take a moment each morning to identify a few things for which you are grateful. They need not be grand or profound. Sometimes the simplest things can bring the deepest joy. A warm cup of tea, the sound of birds outside your window, a conversation with a loved one. By recognizing these gifts, you strengthen your capacity for joy and contentment. As you integrate these elements into your morning, consider also the role of ritual. Rituals are not about rigid adherence to routines, but about creating meaningful patterns in our lives. They provide a structure within which we can explore freedom and creativity. A morning ritual, inspired by Marcus Aurelius, is a way to begin each day with clarity and intention. Rituals help us focus on what truly matters. They remind us of our values and guide us in our daily actions. The Stoics emphasized the importance of living in accordance with nature and reason. By starting your day with a ritual, you align yourself with these principles. You remind yourself of what is within your control and what is not. Incorporating these Stoic rituals into your morning can transform the way you experience your day. You become more intentional, more aware, more grounded. You approach challenges with a sense of calm and resilience, knowing that you have prepared yourself for whatever comes. Imagine stepping into your day with this foundation. You move through your tasks with purpose, your interactions with kindness and understanding. You remain present in each moment, finding tranquility in the midst of any chaos. This is the essence of Stoic living. Marcus Aurelius knew that each day was an opportunity to practice virtue, to become a better version of oneself. His morning rituals were a reflection of this commitment. By adopting these practices, you too can cultivate a life of purpose and clarity. You can build resilience against the uncertainties of life and find peace in the process. As you start your morning tomorrow, consider these practices. Reflect on your intentions. Engage your body, nourish your mind, and practice gratitude. These rituals are not about perfection, but about consistency and growth. They are about setting a tone for your day that is rooted in Stoic wisdom. In this quiet hour before the world fully awakens, you have the power to shape your day. You have the opportunity to align yourself with what truly matters. These rituals, simple yet profound, can guide you toward a life of greater meaning and fulfillment. Embrace them as Marcus Aurelius did, with humility, wisdom, and an open heart. Your morning's new start. As you sit quietly in the early morning light, consider the way the world seems untouched, almost a blank canvas. The soft glow of the dawn reminds us of the potential each day holds, a reminder that each morning offers us a renewed start. This is your time. A moment before the demands of the day begin to press upon you. It's a time to set the stage for how you wish to live the hours ahead. Marcus Aurelius understood this well. His mornings were not rushed or frantic. They were deliberate and thoughtful. He began each day with reflection, allowing himself to connect with his inner world before engaging with the outer one. This practice, this conscious choice, allowed him to anchor himself in his values and set his intentions for the day. Imagine waking up and allowing yourself this same grace. You wake up and before reaching for your phone or diving into an email inbox, you pause. This pause is a sacred space, a buffer that gives you control over how the day unfolds. This pause is an opportunity. It's a moment when you can reflect on what is most meaningful to you and how you wish to embody those values throughout the day. Begin by considering what you are grateful for. Gratitude is not only about acknowledging what is good in your life, but also about training your mind to focus on the positives. Marcus Aurelius often contemplated the blessings he had, reminding himself to appreciate the simple and profound joys of life. As you sit in the quiet of the morning, think of 3 things you are grateful for. Let them fill you with appreciation and set a tone of positivity and abundance for your day. Next, allow yourself a moment of reflection on your intentions. What do you hope to achieve today? How do you want to feel? What is one thing you can do to live in alignment with your values? Marcus believed in the power of intentions. He recognized that without clear intentions, it is easy to be swayed by external events or other people's agendas. By setting your intentions, you create a path for yourself, a guide that will help you navigate the events of the day with purpose and clarity. With your intentions in mind, consider how you can engage your body in this quiet morning time. Marcus Aurelius understood that the health of the body is deeply tied to the health of the mind. Whether it's through gentle stretching, a brisk walk, or a simple breathing exercise, moving your body is a way to awaken your senses and connect with the present moment. Imagine stepping outside, feeling the cool morning air on your skin, watching the sun rise over the horizon. This connection to nature and movement is a reminder of the beauty and complexity of life. As you continue your morning, find time to nourish your mind. Just as Marcus Aurelius read and contemplated the writings of the Stoics, you too can engage with wisdom that inspires and challenges you. Perhaps take a moment to read a passage from a book that speaks to you, or listen to a piece of music that lifts your spirit. These moments of mental nourishment are not indulgences. They are investments in your growth and understanding. Finally, as you prepare to step into your day, practice a moment of mindfulness. Marcus Aurelius often emphasized the importance of being present, of engaging fully with the moment at hand. Before you launch into the tasks ahead, take a deep breath. Feel the air fill your lungs, grounding you in the now. This breath is a reminder that you are alive, that you are here, and that each moment is an opportunity to live with intention and purpose. Now, picture yourself carrying these morning rituals with you throughout the day. You meet challenges with calmness because you've already set your foundation of gratitude and intention. You interact with others with kindness because you've aligned your actions with your values. You find moments of peace in the chaos because you've trained your mind to focus on what truly matters. These morning rituals, inspired by the practices of Marcus Aurelius, are not about achieving perfection. They are about creating a consistent practice that supports your well-being and guides you toward a life of meaning. They are small acts of devotion to yourself, simple yet powerful ways to embrace each day fully. So tomorrow, as you rise with the sun, remember that you have the choice to start anew. You have the opportunity to shape your morning and, in turn, your entire day. Embrace this time, this chance to align with your deepest values and aspirations. Like Marcus Aurelius, approach your morning with humility and an open heart, ready to greet whatever comes your way with courage and wisdom. And if you wish to continue exploring these ideas, if you want to delve deeper into the teachings of Stoicism and how they can help you maintain clarity and set boundaries, consider exploring the Anti-Manipulation Manual, Stoic Tactics for Clarity, Boundaries, and Inner Control. It's available as an ebook on Amazon, and you'll find a link in the description. Let these morning rituals be your guide, your daily touchstone. Let them remind you of who you are and who you strive to become. In the quiet of the morning, you find your strength. In the space between sleep and wakefulness, you discover your resilience. And each day, with each sunrise, you have the opportunity to begin anew, with intention and with grace.